Viewers here in Santon, where we're talking about triple BEE and other issues with the Minister. And as Via says, you can be very much a part of this conversation, as well as the guests that we have here. But let's welcome our guests today. You've seen and heard from the Minister of Trade and Industry, Mr. Rob Davies. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Sandile Zungu is a businessman, but also very involved with the President's Advisory Council on BEE. Thank you very much for joining us. And Dr. Zungu&mazwai, who has had a very keen interest, particularly in the area of SMMEs and their development. Thank you for joining us on the program, gentlemen.
Thank you.
All right, Minister, it seems to me that, you know, the codes, the legislation, it's all great, but I get a sense that maybe it's more about hearts and minds than it is about laws.
Well, I think there is a challenge in that regard. I mean, we call it the tick box mentality, that we have had far too much of that compliance and you just don't want to bring about real change. You just want to be seen to be complying. We've seen far too much of that. And I think what we're trying to do is to push a few elements along which are fundamental, and hope that that will be embraced in the form of an active involvement in supporting the emergence of real active players in the economy. I think that's what we want to see as well. So if we just reduce this to another tick box, I think that would not be optimum. We would like to see, I think, many more active hearts and minds involved in this. But I am detecting that I think many analysts, many players in the economy do think that we're moving broadly in the right direction.
Do you think that enough of a case has been made to convince those people perhaps that are being slow to join the party, as it were, that there's a real business case for empowerment, that it isn't just something that needs to be complied with?
Well, I think that quite often the economic benefits are benefits to society as a whole, and the costs are costs at an individual business level. That can sometimes be the issue. So as to get people to think longer term, to think more strategically, and to position themselves accordingly. So it is a challenge. I've been saying that the codes, the changes to the Act, are not going to be a magic bullet in their own right. They have to go along with many other initiatives, many other interventions. I mean, for example, we are supporting incubator programs. Because we think that relationships between large and small businesses are very critically important. For small businesses, after government, perhaps the biggest market is big business and procurement by big business. And we are supporting and we are prepared to put money up to support initiatives where training, skills development, capacity building around particular supplier activities is supported by a large company. So it's not just the codes, it's also initiatives of that sort where we're prepared to partner with people if they actively embrace the direction we need to move in.
All right. Mr. Zungu, you are a businessman in South Africa. Many would say actually the embodiment of what this BEE game is all about. So, you know, from the dusty streets of Umlazi to where you are now, successful businessman. Why has it worked for you and not for many others?
Well, it's about skills as it is about opportunity. Triple BEE of the old era, even before it became legislation, the focus was on ownership and to a less extent management control. And that's why then you have seen the revised codes are basically saying the priority areas must be surely skills development and enterprise development. Simply because on a sustainable basis, this economy must develop the entrepreneurs who will get involved actively in the productive area of the economy. People like ourselves were very privileged to work with people who held our hands, and therefore we are adequately mentored, albeit informally. We've got to come up with mechanisms through which that program of mentorship becomes a lot more structured and organizations are rewarded for it. And therefore, broadly speaking, on issues of skills development comes those pertinent issues. Clearly, access to capital, that's what young entrepreneurs demand. They expect that the DFI's development finance institutions will become a lot more proactive in accessing, in giving them access to capital, because without such, even if you've got bright ideas, but if people are not prepared to back you with their capital, it becomes extremely difficult, especially when you don't have uncles with old money that you can lean on, unlike white counterparts. So clearly, there are a lot more complex issues. But a very important issue that Minister highlighted earlier is that there's got to be a greater focus on development of black industrialists. People who will graduate from being SMME players, but to be involved in manufacturing for local consumption, but also for exports, who will be creating jobs and helping this economy to grow on a different type of growth trajectory. That's a very important call. We support that as a Black Business Council. It's very complex, of course, because then it calls on the state to use its buying capacity to actually facilitate this. The biggest elephant in the BEE room, as it were, is the misalignment between the broader cause of good practice and the PPPFA. The Preferential Procurement Act, which is mainly relied upon by Treasury as a dictate in terms of how the state will procure. The question that we have at some stage for the minister is, when are we going to have great alignment between, broadly speaking, the cause of good practice and the PPPFA, because these grand objectives of creating black industrialists and getting black suppliers to become part of value chain, especially of the state, become very difficult if the PPPFA has got different type of requirements.
All right, okay, we're going to continue to explore that. I'm going to get your initial comments, Dr. Mazwai, but we're going to have to take a quick break.